people that haven't done anything wrong suddenly find themselves being pushed around, being baton charged, being in a cloud of tear gas, and they've done nothing wrong. The vast bulk of major football disorder, so those sort of major riots that we see from time to time, are almost always caused by a breakdown in crowd management. Okay, it's that the police have done something wrong. They've made a mistake, or the crowd security at the stadium have done something wrong. And that has essentially caused a minor incident of disorder or violence to exacerbate, which draws in fans who didn't have that predisposition to violence, that weren't there to fight, but suddenly feel like they are under attack and that it is justified for them to fight back. And that's when we see major instances of disorder occur. The little football firms themselves that have that predisposition don't usually have the power to cause riots.
Okay, so if the police have essentially made a mistake, and that is what kind of turns a minor incident into a major one, what are those mistakes that they usually make?
Typically, those mistakes involve not engaging with the crowd while it is peaceful. So if you've got a peaceful crowd, particularly if they're drinking, all the crowd management theory tells us that that is the time that police officers should be talking to the crowd and engaging with the crowd, assessing the mood of the crowd, assessing where potential dangers occur, and looking to protect that crowd from attacks from outside. That's an opportunity for the police force and the police officers to basically gain legitimacy among those crowds, to try and be seen as facilitating their legitimate objectives. And what that means is that if problems occur later in the day, those police officers have currency to be able to say to the fans, you stop doing that, or can you please move in this direction? Okay, because they've gained that level of trust and they're seen as being legitimate. So the first mistake that a lot of forces make is not being proactive and not engaging in what we call dialogue policing. The second problem, which leads to disorder caused by police, is when the police use coercive force in an indiscriminate and disproportionate manner, which basically means that people that haven't done anything wrong suddenly find themselves being pushed around, being baton charged, being in a cloud of tear gas, and they've done nothing wrong. And then those fans, some of them may respond, for example, by throwing a bottle of beer that they're drinking back at the police. So those are the two. First, there's a failure to do something. And secondly, there is doing something indiscriminately and disproportionately. And those two factors of poor policing map into each other. Because if you aren't engaged in the crowd and you don't have that intelligence and that legitimacy in the crowd, then it's much more likely that you are going to see an overwhelming response that is disproportionate, coercive, and violent as being legitimate.
Underreaction and then overreaction. When we talk about like the level of violence, how bad does it get? What's normal?
Vandalism, disorder, antisocial behaviour, rioting in stadiums, mass disorder, or serious organised gang violence between different groups of crowds. So it was always a very imprecise label. And now much more serious violence takes place in Eastern Europe, in Central Europe, in Southern Europe. Poland, Hungary, Russia, Belgium, Holland, Italy, increasingly France, all have much more serious problems than the UK.
I'm a big numbers person, and say on a scale of 1 to 10, if 1 is the most peaceful community of happy fans that you could imagine and 10 is the 1980s, like where do you think we are currently on that scale?
Oh, maybe 3.
That's like, it's not going to happen to you, but you know that you have to be aware that it is there.
Yeah, and I think to put it in its context, I think pre-lockdown we were at a 2. So there has been a post-lockdown increase.
Do you think that, does that mean that, is that a trend where we're going to be going back up, or is that kind of just like, all right, the pandemic is lifting for the most part, at least socially, in terms of social gathering, and this is a temporary thing, or do you think, okay, we're ramping back up here?
So I think if we keep doing what we've been doing, particularly I'm talking from the UK here, if we keep doing what we're doing in terms of good crowd management, I think it's just a blip. I think the self-regulation and self-policing among fan groups will re-establish itself, and I think the good football policing operations will also re-establish themselves, and things will calm down. The risk is that it's seen by the authorities as being a trend, and it's seen that the previous things we were doing weren't working, and that therefore we need to up the stakes in terms of, for example, the number of police officers, the aggression of those police officers. And if we do that, then the risk is that you're going to make the situation worse. So it has the potential to get worse. I don't think we'll ever go back to where we were in the 1970s or 1980s, because I think things are just so much better now in terms of stadium infrastructure, legal infrastructure, and expertise of police officers. But there is a risk that some police forces will essentially panic and they'll make things worse. The good football policing operations, I think, will get this under control. And actually, at the moment, there's evidence that things are already starting to come under control.
Is it usually worse when you're talking about violence when a UK team is playing a UK team, or when country X is playing country Y?
As a general rule, it's always worse domestically, because when problems occur domestically, those two teams may be playing each other 4 months down the line, or that time next season. So you have that historical rivalry that develops. So if, for example, you have a situation where the firm gets it wrong and attacks a group of innocent supporters of a rival team, then you've got to worry about what retribution there will be for that later on. Whereas, of course, when teams from different countries play each other, they may not play each other again for another 30 years. So as a general rule, it tends to be domestic rivalries that cause a lot of problems.